Kawan-kawan, selamat datang. Selamat datang di diskusi kita sore hari ini. Eh, Diskusi kali ini akan ada dua dua pembicara yang dari Filipina dan akan menggunakan bahasa Inggris. Untuk kawan-kawan yang hadir di sini dan memerlukan penerjemah, kawan-kawan bisa eh, menggunakan channel penerjemah ya, dan pindah ke channel Chinese, dan itu ada dijelaskan juga di chat box. Ya, selamat datang untuk semuanya. Di sini juga akan disiarkan secara langsung ya di YouTube, dan channel YouTube nanti akan di-share oleh kawan-kawan dari Tipos uh, di kolom chat box ya. Oke, terima kasih semuanya. Selamat datang kawan-kawan. Selamat good afternoon for all. So ya, kita akan memulai dengan diskusi ini. Kenapa kemudian kita melakukan diskusi ini? Karena kita melihat adanya situasi di Filipina gitu ya, terkait soal Negros dengan adanya latihan gabungan antara militer Filipina, AS dan Jepang atau Balikatan. Ini yang kemudian justru berdampak pada masyarakat sipil gitu, karena di sana juga terdapat perkebunan luas ya, perkebunan tebu di wilayah tersebut. Pelatihan ini kemudian juga menjadi alasan kemudian terjadinya tragedi pembantaian dari yang berdampak pada 19 warga di Togoso, Negros, dan kemudian di 9 di antara korban tewas adalah aktivis HAM. Nah, ini juga kemudian membenarkan gitu ya, membenarkan militer kemudian melakukan pelebelan atau retagging di dalam ruang sipil. Dan sebenarnya apa yang kemudian terjadi di Filipina ini itu juga terjadi di Indonesia. Jadi harapannya diskusi ini kita akan banyak untuk mengeksplorasi gitu ya, dari kawan-kawan Filipina dan dari kawan-kawan Indonesia sendiri, karena memang praktek militerisme, terus kemudian eh, penyempitan ruang-ruang sipil, masifnya intimidasi dan kriminalisasi itu tuh juga terjadi di Indonesia, Filipina, dan mungkin di negara yang lainnya. Sebelum kita, nanti akan ada pembicara dari Filipina, kita ada G. Estrada dari UMA, kemudian juga ada Enjo dari CEC. Tapi sebelumnya kita akan mendengarkan bagaimana sih situasi secara nasional, terutama di Indonesia, dari Bang Rizal kita sebagai koordinator dari Tipos. Oh ya, kemudian nanti akan juga ada penyampaian dari Patricia dari Jagadeka mengenai situasi lokal yang ada di Buol. Oke, silakan Kakak Rizal.
Ya, terima kasih Mbak Kartika. For my sessions, I'll be speaking in English language. So yeah, friends can use the interpretation feature to hear the English to Indonesian interpretation. I'll be start by shortly introducing our network. It's Transnational Palm Oil Labor Solidarity Network. It's a network focusing on palm oil industry and other agriculture sectors. It emphasizes more on the workers' struggle, also in solidarity, and with the aim to build an alliance with broader sector, including with the peasants movement, and also with the environmentalists. Workers become one of the focus because we see the trends of the palm oil expansions that also not only shape the landscape itself, but it also transform the livelihood of the people, the communities whose in the past relies on their own, have direct access to the resources, they own their own lands now, gradually and almost extending to many countries, starting to become labor from the land dispossessions. So we feels that it's important workers to become one of the leaders in the movement. And Tipos covers wide range with Indonesia and Malaysia as the main members, given the scale of the palm oil plantations mostly concentrated in Southeast Asia countries, with Indonesia and Malaysia as the largest. We've also been hearing from our colleagues that palm oil also expanding to the neighboring countries, including Philippines, Cambodia, and besides palm oil producer, since palm oil is also a global commodity, it is being used extensively in many sectors. We also expand our network to reach to the countries that consumes palm oil, importing palm oil from Southeast Asia, including countries in the Europe. And we also started to build our alliance with friends in the West and Central Africa as palm oil corporations that have been exploiting both the land and the people in Southeast Asia is now also reaching to African continent. We aim to build the movement supporting the organizing effort by the grassroots organizations. Thank you everyone for joining these public discussions. Today, we gather to discuss on issues that extend far beyond the agriculture. We are here to examine the relationships between the palm oil expansions, the land rights, and the land dispossessions, and also the increase of military and the police forces' role in securing large-scale agribusiness investment. As palm oil become one of the largest world most profitable agriculture commodities, palm oil can be found in many products used in a daily lives, from food to cosmetics, and also recently in the biofuels. In this context, both the governments and the corporations often present plantations expansions as a pathway to economic growth, employment, and the development. However, behind these promises, many rural communities, including the workers, continue to face land dispossessions, environmental destructions, and violent conflict over territory and livelihood. They've been also receiving reports, many violent actions from the state, particularly, and also the corporations hiring security forces to not only criminalize grassroots activists, leaders, even until to the reach and the killings, as we will hear from our colleagues from the Philippines. And what is striking is that these conflicts are not isolated incidents. Similar patterns can be found across different countries and the regions. In the Philippines, for example, especially in Negros, our colleagues from UMA, a peasant organizations, have long faced militarizations, intimidations, and violence, including the recent killing of one of their activists, has once again raised serious concern about the use of security operations in areas where communities are struggling for land rights and social justice. In Indonesia, we see comparable dynamics in Bangkal village, for example, in central Kalimantan. The community protests related to the palm oil plantations, palm oil plantations obligations, and related to the land rights, and that in violence when security forces open fire on the demonstrator. In Buol, we have Nona that will share more stories in Central Sulawesi, Local communities have struggled for decades over land claimed by large-scale plantations called Hardaya Inti Plantations, the name of the company. While also the communities face criminalizations, intimidations, and constant presence of state security institutions, both military and the police forces. Although each case has its own history and context, but one common question emerge. Why are social and agrarian conflicts so often treated as security problems rather than an issues of justice, rights, and democratic participations? We found this pattern is not unique to Southeast Asia. Similar experience have also been documented in parts of Africa and Latin America, including in West and Central Africa, where the communities defending their land and livelihood frequently encounter militarized response in the names of protecting investment, maintaining stability, or ensuring development. These realities compel us to reflect on the broader issues. When the protections of investment becomes a security priority, whose security is actually being protected, being served, and what happens to the rest of the peasants, the indigenous peoples, workers, and rural communities who depends on the land for their survival. In today's discussions, we aim to provide an opportunity to learn from these experiences from our colleagues in Boal, Central Sulawesi, our colleagues from the Philippines, and also inviting other participants to share their experiences to compare struggles across countries and to explore pathway toward accountability, human rights, and genuine agrarian justice. With that, I would like to welcome our speakers and invite all participants to engage in an open and meaningful discussions. Thank you.
Oke, terima kasih Kakak Rizal. Ya, seperti apa yang disampaikan oleh Kak Rizal ya, bahwa perampasan lahan secara besar-besaran, kemudian kekerasan terhadap masyarakatnya, terutama masyarakat adat dan masyarakat lokal, itu tidak hanya dan eksploitasi terhadap buruh yang bekerja di dalam sawit itu tidak hanya terjadi di Indonesia, tapi juga di negara bagian yang lainnya, bahkan tidak hanya di Asia Tenggara, tapi juga di Afrika dan di negara yang lainnya juga memiliki dampak yang sama. Dan apa yang terjadi di perkebunan sawit itu juga terjadi di sektor yang lainnya seperti perkebunan tebu. Mungkin Ji akan bisa menjelaskan lebih dalam lagi apa yang kemudian kekerasan yang terjadi gitu ya, akar persoalannya, kemudian kekerasan peristiwa yang terjadi. Mungkin Ji dari UMA dapat menjelaskan lebih lanjut apa yang kemudian terjadi di Negros. Oke, Ji, the floor is yours.
Hello. So I'm clear. Thanks for inviting me in this online forum to discuss about Negros. No? While Negros has palm oil, it's fairly new. No? Not more than a decade in one place called Candoni. And it's the only palm oil plantation so far that is in a public land. No? So unlike the others, there are more than 60,000 hectares in the Philippines, most of palm oil plantations, mostly in Mindanao, but all are private except for this one in Candoni. So the company, Happy Incorporated, has an agreement with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. It's called IFMA, Integrated Forestry Management Agreement. But Negros historically and up to now is more known in the Philippines as the sugar bowl of the Philippines. No? Because half of the sugar cane produced in the Philippines is in Negros. No? And Negros is also known for feudal, no, and semi-feudal exploitation, because up to now, uh, plantations that were formed during the Spanish colonial era, what we call haciendas, are still existing in Negros. No? Because supposedly there have been various land reforms in the Philippines, including the last one, the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, which started during Cory Aquino's time. But Negros, not all lands were distributed, not all hacienda lands. No? More than 100,000 hectares were not distributed. In addition to that, many of the lands distributed, which were formerly haciendas or sugarcane plantations, because the agrarian reform beneficiaries who used to be sugarcane field workers has no capital, they were forced, no, to lease their lands back to the landlords. No? So it's up to, maybe the estimate is up to 80% of the land distributed to agrarian reform beneficiaries have been leased back to the landlords. No? And Negros for a long time, even before martial law in the Philippines during Ferdinand Marcos Sr.'s was already called a social volcano because of that situation. No? Meaning, because of the intense exploitation, which I will explain later, it is natural, because in the Philippines there is civil war, it is natural that there are armed rebels in the island. No? And the Negros incident or the Toposo massacre happened on April 19 this year. Maybe I describe where Negros first is. No, Negros is in the middle of the Philippines, near Cebu but nearer Panay. No, it's part of the Western Visayas, which is different from Negros Oriental. It's Negros Occidental, but they are in the same island because of the language. No, Occidental is more Hiligaynon, but except the north, and Oriental is Cebuano. But now they again made it into one island, Negros Island region. So there was an incident where there was a clash between the rebels and the military, but not all that were killed by the military were rebels. No, there were 19 killed, but the rebel army, the New People's Army, and the National Fact-Finding Mission said only 10 were actual combatants. The rest were non-combatants, including one of our staff, Errol Wendell. No? He's a staff of UMA, and he and the others were sent to Negros, including two American activists, to investigate the conditions of the not only the agricultural workers but the people, because there's a new phenomena also in Negros besides sugar, besides palm oil. There is land use conversion from agricultural land. Many have become renewable energy projects like solar power, because it is in Negros where the most number of solar farms are found. But maybe Enjo will be the one to explain that more. I will just say it in passing. No? So, and there was an autopsy, no, made on 5 of those killed. All of them were shot at the back, not near, and one of them died. Alisa Alano, she's a student council officer of UP Diliman. No? She was wounded. There was no fatal wounds on her, but she died because of loss of blood. No? She had a wound in the the leg, which resulted in her death. Even the, I don't know, during the fact-finding mission, the military showed pictures of the non-combatants and planted guns and even ammo pouch. But the pouch of RJ Ledesma, no, he was the one who wrote the primer on on palm oil expansion in Candoni. His pouch was inverted, no? And the problem, there are three, those who died, two combatants, and our staff whose remains have not been have been not yet recovered, no? Meaning because when they went to the funeral parlor in Toboso, they did not show the face of their loved ones, no? They only showed a picture before the embalmment, and there was military and police presence that intimidated them. So the one that was taken in Manila by Eros family is not his remains, no? So that's why we will have a press conference this January 9 regarding that. Anyway, so but why is Negros a social volcano? No? Maybe I will discuss that more, but a little fast, no, because of the time, no. So do you see? It's already here. Okay. So it's in our language, but I will translate. Negros continuous struggle against the program, the government for reclassification, conversion, and monopoly of land. You know? Because in Negros, there is a strong contradiction between the landlords and the farmers or peasants. In the Philippines, we consider sugarcane workers or agricultural workers in the sugar industry as peasants also, no? And indirectly, the government also recognizes that because during the CARP, Agrarian Reform Program, even agricultural workers can become agrarian reform beneficiaries. No? So in Negros, there are 1.3 million hectares of land. 63% are privately owned. 80% that has 10 hectares and above are controlled or are owned by 24% of landlords, of middle and big landlords. So meaning most of the peasants and the people of Negros have no land of their own, even if there's supposed to be a land reform. No? Because this has been a problem of land reform. Because one, land reform is there's no free distribution of land. You have to pay it, no, for 30 years. And if you are not able to pay it for 3 cumulative years, it will be foreclosed and go back to the government. No? And at the same time, the peasants, whether they are landless farmers or agricultural workers, have no capital of their own. No? So many of them are forced to rent back the land to the landlords or to the financiers, which are very close to the landlords. For example, in Negros, of the 160,000 hectares that were distributed during the CARP, Agrarian Reform Program, wherein there are 145,000 agrarian reform beneficiaries, 70% of these are lease, no? And with regards to the situation of sugarcane workers in the Philippines, there are around 700,000 field sugarcane workers, half of which are in Negros. No? 97% of them are paid what we call the Pacquiao system. If it's in industry, it's the piece rate. But if it's in a plantation, it's, I think the proper term for that is work gang, no? Like because their situation is they are like slaves, no? And if there are only 3% are paid daily or of 480 pesos a day, which is below the minimum wage. Pacquiao rate, meaning because the most number of work is during harvest time, you need to fill up minimum of 10 tons, one truck of 10 tons. It can be bigger, no? It can be 10 to 12, even more people, workers, and you work not more than 8 hours, sometimes up to 12 hours for that. No? So how much is no? You are paid very less. It's 400 to 500 pesos per ton, 5,000 divided by 12. Sometimes it's deducted for the foreman or the leader, and the rest is divided to them. But sometimes it takes more than 12 hours. Sometimes it takes more than 1 day, 1.5 days, no? Because of that. And the problem now, because of the extreme heat, there are cases which started in Batangas last year, but now in Negros also, that the cutting is done very early in the morning, but loading is done at night time, no? Because of the extreme heat. And the problem in Negros, all ano no, all what's this? All crops have lean season, but there is a longer lean season in the sugar industry. Actually, we don't call it a lean season. We call it a dead season, or tiempo muerto, which is Spanish, because it can last up to 6 months, where practically there is no work. No? So it's like so they find other work. Some kind of hacenderos or landlords can give them minimal work, but the pay is also minimal. Meaning, how do they go by? No, how so they tend to what's this? Go into borrow money or borrow food from the hacienda owner or the landlord, which they will pay later. No, it will be deducted from their salary. So it's like they are working just to pay off their debts. During the time of Marcos, there is no there is no change in the situation, but there is an there are more importation of sugar and molasses, even if we are more or less but now not that self-reliant anymore, no? But not much, because last year the Philippine government allowed the importation of 1 million metric tons of sugar, refined sugar. No? So because of that, the price of sugar that was bought from the sugar planters and the molasses went down. No? But the price of retail did not. No? Because usually there are cronies. If old Marcos, the father of Marcos today, had cronies in Negros, he also has his own cronies in the sugar industry. Then other than that, there's palm oil, more than 6,000 hectares. It is owned by Hacienda Asia Plantation Incorporated, but it is owned by DMCI, which is a big conglomerate, no, in the Philippines, which is more on building condominiums, but it also has has mining, no, in Mindanao. Other than that, there are road widening and ecotourism, but I think Enjo will discuss that more. There's quarrying and mining, which also affects the land, including sugarcane areas. Then there are solar farms. This, like I told you, Negros has the most number of solar farms. This has more than 500 hectares. But other than that, they want to build other kinds of renewable energy, which Echo will discuss. So why is there land conversion? No? Because it's usually the local government will be the one to reclassify the land as non-agriculture, but it will be the Department of Agrarian Reform or DAR which will approve, no? And usually it approves the land. So I already discussed that. And there, under the Constitution of the Philippines, foreigners cannot own land, including agricultural land, but they can lease and go into other agreements like ownership. It used to be 25 to 50 years. Now, Marcos Jr. extended it to 99 years. Then there's the what we call the split program funded by the World Bank. Because under the previous land reform, there are two kinds of certificate of land ownership award. One is collective LOA, the other is individual. So they want all the collective LOAs to be individualized. Meaning, if you are just alone, if you're individualized, it's easier for you to be intimidated into selling your land. No? And at the same time, in Negros, there was a time that there were many land occupation, we call bungkalan, but in their area, land cultivation area, up to 5,000 hectares. So they want to destroy that. No? So there are, it's just telling that there are many, it's the government itself that it classifies, converts the land, and leads to the, even to, what's this, land grabbing. No? So what's the response? No? Of course, the farmers, including agricultural workers, are not quiet. No? They struggle for their land. So this is in Sagay. No, that's not in Sagay. That's in another place in Negros. What's this? You can see. They unite for land and just wages. Despite the end of land reform, though, because CARP already has ended, they persist to struggle for their land. No? And because of that, the state is not, if you do that, if you are struggling for your land, even struggling for just wages, which is under our constitution, under our laws, even under international labor and other laws, there is repression. No? So not only farmers were killed in Negros, but it includes a lawyer and many others. No? Maybe since 2017, many have been killed. There you can see 2019 again. During this time, Sempo 1 and Sempo 2, that's in Negros Occidental, no? They use like the Tokhang style of killing, meaning because there's a lot of drug killings during the time of Duterte. That's why he's in the International Criminal Court now. They use that, no? That style. They said that the farmers were organized in fought back. That's why they were killed. No? That's also their issues when killing many supposedly drug addicts and small drug pushers. Then one day in 2019, 14 were killed. No? In 6 days, 17 were killed. That's more in Oriental. Other than killings, there is vilification or what we call red tagging. No? So Negros, the organizations in Negros, including NFSW, they are a member organization, National Federation of Labor Workers, are said to be local National Democratic Front organization. This is a picture of combatants and non-combatants, two of which are already dead. This is also threatening. They put what's this? Anong kabaong? A casket to intimidate you. And nothing changed under Marcos. No? At present, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think 7 to 9 infantry battalions in Negros, the whole of Negros. But they say the rebels are almost decimated or remnants. Why are there still many there? No? So, if you target civilians during a civil war, it's against international humanitarian law, no? Including Protocol 2 of the Geneva Convention. And no enemies captured, meaning no armed rebels are captured. No? So these people, including Karima and Erickson Acosta, were extrajudicially killed. No? Karima was wounded also in battle, but she was prevented from medical attention. So she died of lack of blood. And this one extrajudicially killed, this one extrajudicially killed. No? There are also 8 victims of enforced disappearances in Negros. Other than that, Negros has the most number of political prisoners in the Philippines, no? 113, no? Including women and elderly. 23 were arrested during the Marcos time. No? So this does not yet include the killings, does not yet include the Toboso 19, no? Which is against international humanitarian law or the law of war, because you cannot kill or force the combat or even if they are combatants but they have no more arms or they are wounded, cannot fight back. Because there was a drone, no, which was shown but later deleted in one local press in Negros, which showed one of the NPA that was supposedly killed was already captured, no, and was still alive. But later he was killed. No? And there are some reports, some other armed rebels were also already captured, then were summarily killed. No? And 2 of those killed of the 9 civilians were minors. No? So what can we do? No? We can stand up, speak out like what we are doing now, and we can initiate solidarity activities, just like what Tipos is doing now, which is very welcome. And we can write government agencies. I think later we will have also a joint statement, no? Not only about Negros, but also the situation in Indonesia. And support in various ways the struggle of the people, be it moral, material, or financial, etc. And our is not to martial law in Negros, no? Because in the cities there seems to be no martial law, but in the countryside, not only in Negros, but almost all the countryside in the Philippines is like under martial law. Thank you. How do I get out?
Oke, thank you, Ji. Iya, artinya memang kekerasan yang terjadi di Negros tidak kemudian terjadi tiba-tiba kejadian yang kemarin 19 orang itu, tetapi ini juga sudah terjadi selama bertahun-tahun karena adanya upaya untuk memonopoli atau penguasaan besar-besaran lahan ya, yang itu sekarang tidak hanya terutamanya untuk di Negros tebu, tapi ternyata tidak hanya tebu, tapi juga ada mining dan mining, solar farm, terus kemudian juga mulai kalau tadi dibilang hacienda Asia plantation itu juga mulai beralih juga mulai melakukan ekspansi di perkebunan sawit begitu. Nah, apa yang disampaikan Ci tadi terkait bagaimana kemudian termasuk situasi petaninya, eksploitasi terhadap petaninya. Ini yang kemudian menunjukkan adanya perlawanan, tetapi di apa? Ini juga kemudian ada pelabelan ya yang kemudian terjadi. Nah, pembicara berikutnya dari Center for Environmental Concern, Enjo Sarmiento, mungkin bisa menjelaskan bagaimana situasinya, kemudian juga dampaknya gitu ya terhadap lingkungan, terus kemudian juga terhadap pejuang lingkungan gitu ya, atau pejuang hak asasi manusia. Karena kalau disampaikan Ci tadi, ini tidak hanya masyarakat sipil atau bahkan mereka yang melakukan perlawanan, tetapi juga terjadi di berakibat juga terdampak di yang lainnya. Oke, Angel, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would anyone be able to present my slides on my behalf? Because I don't think I'd be able to do it from my end.
Okay, sure. Can you?
Thank you so much. If I think I've sent a link to Sikil, or maybe
Bang Sikil bisa berbagi untuk share screen?
anyway, while we're waiting for that, I
Yeah.
just have to say, G's discussion is actually very comprehensive by itself already. Like what I've mentioned, he's already touched a lot of the other topics that I will be discussing about. So that was a really good start for this discussion. Hopefully what I've prepared will still, provide much needed information for the discussion. And I think besides there will be kind of like a more open-ended discussion after the slides, right? So if anything, if there will be any questions, then I think it'll be nice to have it after my slides. I'll try to squeeze this discussion within the 15-minute limit. Can we have it on full screen?
Oh. Wait. Full screen.
Mhm. Let me just.
Is Enzo disconnected?
Tapi rumahnya tuh belakang rumah temanku. Tunggu.
Oke, itu accept oke. Oke. Present, Pak Sikil, pojok kanan atas, present. Pojok kanan atas, present. Share. Pojok kanan atas, sebelah kirinya share. Diklik.
Sepertinya Enjo
Itu di kursor kamu ada present, ada share, present, pojok kanan atas. Diklik.
Pojok kanan atas.
Itu present. Kanan yang kanan.
Oke. Tutup.
Right, there we go. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry about the hassle.
No worries.
All right, thank you. So yeah, I'm just gonna set a timer for myself as well. So yes, thank you. Again, I'm Enjo Sarmiento. I am a researcher for the Center for Environmental Concerns Philippines, and I was asked to prepare something to talk about the militarization, the environmental destruction, and the rampant land grabbing happening right now in Negros in connection to the very recent Toboso 19 massacre in Negros. So I would like to start my presentation with this article that was released by the Philippine News Agency, which is the state monitored, state run news agency here in the Philippines. And this was released the day after the Toboso 19 massacre. We can see that in this article, they immediately claimed that the 19 killed in Negros were all rebels. And yet a line in here says that, they are yet to determine the what do you call this? The identities of all the victims. So this is a stark contrast and a very good depiction actually of what it is like right now to be part of any form of activism here in the Philippines, especially if you're connected with land reform and indigenous rights struggles. So let's go to the next slide. So yeah, so what I will try to be able to conduct or provide with my discussion is to somehow give an idea of why the victims, including the people's guerrilla fighters who were included in the victims of 2019, why they were all there in Negros. Because after the news of the massacre were released in mainstream media and it hit everyone's consciousness here in the Philippines, everyone, most especially the trolls and state controlled pages, were all very quick to question kind of the validity and the reasons as to why these people were there in the first place. So let's try to see if we can find an answer ourselves. So let's go to the next slide. So from the perspective of an environmental researcher like we are here in CEC, Negros Island is actually a very unique island, both in terms of physical characteristics and of the biodiversity that it has. It is a very large island. It's actually the fourth largest in the Philippines and the third most populated, and it is situated in the very strategic tropical belt in the Philippines, and its topography is dominated by a range of active and dormant volcanoes in its middle, and it has steep slopes descending from these volcanic highlands down to the deep valleys and coastal lowlands, reaching down to the beaches and the mangrove forests and the coral systems. And I mean, even the I think every Southeast Asian know about the coral triangle because it's the concentration of all marine life forms. It has the highest concentration of marine life forms, and Apo Island, which is the very middle of this coral triangle, sits just at the southern tip of Negros Island. So let's go to the next slide. So given this, physical conditions of the island, it's very natural for it to reach very high levels of endemism. It harbors some of the world's endangered species, and many of these are endemic and not to be seen anywhere else in not only in the Philippines but in the whole world. And what it means is, when a land is very diverse in terms of its living species, then you can expect that it should be able to support even a very large population of people, of communities residing here. It should be able to support multiple waves of migration to the island. It should be able to support histories, what do you call this? Generations and generations of Filipinos living in this island. So let's go to the next slide. This part, G has already mentioned a big part of it. Negros Island, all throughout the Philippine history, has always been known as the sugar bowl, or the sugar capital of the Philippines. This was basically started by the Spaniards during their colonization, but this was further entrenched, further intensified and institutionalized by the American colonizers when they came here in the Philippines. The hacienderos, or the hacienda system that they started, was not abolished at all by the Americans, because they figured that it would be much easier to to what do you call this? It would be much easier for them to manipulate and control the locals, as well as gather the most number and volume of natural resources, with these hacienda system being retained. So, and then by around the 1850s to the 1900s, the Negros Island was serving a very unique role, a very pivotal role in terms of the sugar market worldwide, because these were the times when the U.S. was not exactly able to maintain its stronghold in its colonies in the Caribbean as well as in Africa, and there was a massive gap in terms of sugar resources, and that's where Negros Island was able to come in. By that time, Negros was already supplying 60 to 70% of the sugar in the Philippines, which until nowadays, sugar cane is considered as a high value crop. So you'd think that people living in Negros Island would be very blessed, but it's actually quite the contrast. So let's go to the next slide. So this photo hit international news in the 1980s, and it actually exposed a very exacerbated famine that lasted around more or less 5 years in Negros. G mentioned that this was the Negros famine in the 1980s, and this was because the sugar market collapsed, and the U.S. pulled back the some sort of security that it had with the Philippines during the Laurel-Langley Act. So the Philippines was in some kind of protection from the volatile market, but when the agreement between the U.S. and the Philippines expired, it left the sugarcane industry in the Philippines, specifically in Negros Island, very susceptible to a crashing world market amid a time when global prices in sugar were also spiraling down. So on top of the ongoing plunder and corruption of the Marcoses, the historic monocrop farming that has degraded the soil. So it all resulted to a famine that, as we've mentioned, lasted more or less 5 years. And we mentioned that it is an exacerbated famine because even long before that, the Negrenses, as we call the people living in Negros, the Negrenses were already in some serious level of hunger, maintained by the landlessness, and it was only exacerbated by the global sugar supply, sugar market crash. So let's go to the next slide. And then after the Marcoses were ousted from position, and the so-called Asia's mother of democracy, Corazon Cuanco Aquino, was seated as the next president, a lot of Filipinos were actually very hopeful that the promises of land reform, genuine land reform that's been long delayed from them, that these would all be answered. But as we can see, the famine actually continued on, because it turned out the very president herself, Corazon Cojuangco Aquino, did not turn her back from her origins, because their family were landlords, sugarcane landlords as well, from Central Luzon. And I think G mentioned that the Corazon Aquino enacted the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, supposedly to answer the demand for genuine agrarian reform. But this was only used to either send farmers further into bankruptcy, or to get back the lands, and it just resulted to further concentration of lands among landlords. So let's go to the next slide. So after the what do you call this? After the Cojuangco Aquino regime, the U.S. Cojuangco Aquino regime, this lack of genuine land reform only continued with the preceding presidents, from Marcos to Cory Aquino, up to the president that we have right now, which is actually the son of the ousted tyrannical leader. So even until now, we can see that Marcos Jr. administration still lacks genuine agrarian reform, despite history's generations of such demands. The sugar industry crisis, or no, I mean the sugar industry saw another crisis around 2022 and 2023, and it never really got to bounce back fully from that. And we can still see that peasant struggles are still answered by militarization and repression, not just in Negros, but in the whole of the Philippines. So the thing is, when we talk about land in Negros, although I'm pretty sure G has already mentioned a comprehensive review of how land is not being provided to the farmers. Another thing that the farmers, the indigenous population of Negros, are facing is the environmental destruction, and just like what G has mentioned, the use of it to purposes outside its supposed usage, which is for the people. So let's go to the next slide. So just like what G has mentioned earlier, Negros Island is still facing rampant mining, explorations, permits, and even illegal minings happening in the whole of island. It was the host of Marikalum mining, which is a 2,600 hectare copper gold mining site, the largest open pit mining in the island, and the site of the first mining disaster in the Philippines. While this is defunct by now, but there are actually studies being conducted to kind of revive the mine itself, despite local resistance. And then there is still the Hinobaan copper prospect, which is looking at a $480 million open pit mine project being used or being pushed by the Copper Development Corporation. You also have the Basay mining, defunct copper mine that is being planned to be revived by Department of Finance for the remaining around 105 million tons of copper ore. And then the Negros Island is also seeing the abuse of, because the Philippines right now doesn't necessarily have any concrete or definite regulations or laws with offshore mining, and sand mining. So right now, Negros is actually facing at least 11 permits that has been submitted as applications. So spanning from Hinobaan up to Sagay City up north. So, and then we are also seeing, multiple quarries as well as reclamation projects, just like one in Bacolod, that is already displacing fisherfolk communities, as well as a proposed tunnel that will, drive through the mountains from Himamaylan City to Tayasan. So from the east coast to West Coast to East Coast. So, all in all, these projects, these development aggression, are constantly being criticized um, and being resisted by the locals and by advocates because they see that it's not the people who are going to benefit from these, and it will only bring forth much more destruction than benefit that it can ever provide. So let's go to the next slide. So on top of mining and quarrying and development aggression infrastructure projects that are being questioned, G has also mentioned that Negros is also a hotspot of the dirty. We as environmentalists call it the dirty transition happening right now, because earlier this year, the Marcos administration actually decided to declare all renewable projects as what do they call this, as priority projects. So they will be receiving shorter approval time spans. There will be receiving uh, prioritizations, and even tax cuts or some sort of benefit or another. So right now, the Negros Island is being paraded as the renewable energy capital of the Philippines. And however, the stark contrast in this is that many of these, actually all of these projects, are either wholly controlled and owned by private companies, or are being built by private companies under, as we in the Philippines here call it, PPPs, or public-private partnerships, where the government enters into agreement with private companies. They sign of agreements, having the companies build the infrastructure and benefit off of it for a number of years, and then have it transferred eventually to the government. However, this has long been proven very detrimental and not very benefiting at all, especially considering that the largest names in the concentration of energy resources and riches here in the Philippines are also the ones behind the renewable projects in Negros. So, I'm still good. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So one would think that, even despite having legal and even worldwide recognition among government officials and scientific communities alike, development aggression and environmental plunder are still abound and often barely monitored. So Negros Island actually has a number of natural parks and protected areas, and yet the ongoing environmental plunder are happening. And always the very first to feel the impact and be displaced are the farming and fishing communities of the peasants, and the Ata or Ati communities of the indigenous sectors of the island. So they are always on the receiving end of these rights abuses. So let's go to the next slide. Now this one, G has already also mentioned, but in a 2024 comprehensive research that was published by the Global Witness, an international rights watchdog, in partnership with Kalikasan People's Network for the Environment, they actually found out that the state military is the single biggest perpetrator of abuses, abductions, and killings among environmental defenders. This is part of the research, or part of the report, that eventually found out that the Philippines remains as the most dangerous country here in Asia among environmental defenders for, I think, 13 or 14 years straight. And now the thing is, a cross-reference actually shows that militarism, the presence of the military, the presence of the de facto martial law, and the presence of military camps themselves, it is always where the big projects are. And where the big projects are, there will always be local resistances. And that's where the militaries are always are. So it already debunks, this is already mentioned by G, it already debunks the claims by AFP, whenever they are being exposed with their de facto martial law and their intensified militarization, they always say that they are just there to proceed with counterinsurgency measures. But this is in a very stark contrast with their constant declaration that the red fighters that they are fighting against are already out of the island. As a matter of fact, in February 2024, they they suggested that the island be recognized and declared as under a state of stable internal peace and security, which is just a similar term to saying that it's already insurgency free. And yet, the executive memorandum number 32, which was first enacted by the U.S. Duterte administration, it's actually still in place and being enacted. This was actually the memorandum that, legally mandated that additional battalions of both AFP or the soldiers and PNP or the policemen be stationed in Negros. Now, this is a memorandum that hasn't expired yet and is not being junked or countered by the current administration, even after its signing precedent already out of the Malacanang Palace. So you see that no matter how many times the Marcos administration, the U.S. Marcos administration, presents itself as a human rights champion, you can see that it's and also it presents itself as a better administration in comparison to the Duterte administration, especially in terms of human rights. It's actually very much exposed that the actual conditions on the ground tells otherwise. So all in all, it just shows that the state, the AFP as its tool, as well as other agencies, the NTF-ELCAC, the PNP, they are all losing a war against its very own people. And it's because the conditions are remaining, the conditions remain. So the people will always find its way to perform its role in revolting and ushering in a better economic, political, and social system that, will always serve their interest first. So the last slide, it will just show the tribute and one of the artworks, one of the many countless artworks. Let's go to the last slide. So it just shows the tribute that was held to commemorate the heroism not just of the 9 civilians but of all the 19 victims of the Toboso massacre, as well as one of the many countless works of art that were produced in commemoration of them. So hopefully, I think that's for my slides. That's for my part. I went over 15 minutes, but hopefully it at least provided some, I guess, foundational idea on the question, why the Totoposo 19 victims and why the resistance in Negros is still there and persisting. So thank you.
Thank you, Enjo. Ya, mungkin tadi dijelaskan kan soal banyaknya ini ya, apa namanya, proyek-proyek tidak hanya kemudian di perkebunan, tapi juga proyek-proyek negara mengatasnamakan transisi energi yang dapat dikatakan sebagai quote and quote atau tanda kutip sebagai solusi dari krisis iklim itu juga justru kemudian banyak adanya militer-militer yang ada di situ kemudian sebagai pengamanan dan perlawanan juga terus berlangsung ya, karena memang di penderitaan rakyat kemudian ini semakin bertambah gitu. Kalau tadi ditunjukkan bagaimana kelaparan, terus kemudian juga di Filipina juga memiliki tensi yang cukup tinggi dari penelitian Kalikasan terkait soal pelanggaran atau pelanggaran atau kekerasan yang dilakukan oleh militer ya. Nah, meskipun kemudian Marcos menampilkan diri sebagai orang yang peduli terhadap hak asasi manusia, tapi pada kenyataannya Filipina merupakan negara tertinggi dengan pelanggaran hak asasi manusia. Nah, hal ini kemudian tidak hanya terjadi di Filipina, ini akan disampaikan oleh Patricia dari Jagadeka yang juga sebagai pejuang hak asasi manusia ya, dia juga berjuang terkait soal isu-isu di perkebunan kelapa sawit, terutama dari sektor petaninya, dan Patricia juga kemudian mengorganisir untuk di area nikel, pertambangan nikel ya, yang ini juga menjadi salah satu proyek besar untuk transisi energi. Ya, Patricia, mungkin bisa langsung.
Ya,
Terima kasih.
oke, makasih Kakak Tika, kawan-kawan semua. Ini untuk mempermudah solidaritas saja, saya akan coba untuk menampilkan presentasi atau saya tidak ada slideshow, tapi saya akan coba berbicara dalam bahasa Inggris terkait statement untuk solidaritas ini. Memang saya tidak akan bicara banyak soal case, tapi saya akan lebih menekankan pada from Toboso Negros Occidental, dari Toboso Occidental Negros ke Indonesia. Kita akan bicara soal militerisasi, perampasan tanah, dan bagaimana kemudian masyarakat di Southeast Asia atau masyarakat di Asia Tenggara harus memperjuangkan kedaulatannya. Oke, jadi kawan-kawan izinkan saya berbicara dalam bahasa Inggris. Thank you so much, G and Enjo, for helping us better understand the situation in Negros and in the Philippines, especially. From the information you share, I can see that the Toboso 19, if we could say it is a tragedy, is not merely a local tragedy in the Philippines. The killing of at least 19 civilians on April 2020 this year, correct me if I'm wrong, illustrated how agrarian conflicts, security operations, social inequality, and struggles over natural resources can lead to violence against civilians. The Negros experience also shows how demands for land rights, livelihoods, and social justice are often treated as security concern rather than legitimate rights claims. When security approach replace just and democratic solution, civic space shrinks and the risk of violence increases. At the same time, Negros must be understood within the broader context of growing militarization and geopolitical competition in the Asia-Pacific region. For communities across Southeast Asia, the Toboso 19 raises critical questions. Who is security meant to protect? Who benefits from development? And how can people's rights be defended amid powerful economic, political, and security interests? Discussing about Toboso means discussing the future of democracy, social justice, and people's sovereignty in the region. That is why we are talking about Toboso, and it is important for us as a Southeast Asia communities. It's also interesting to talk about the Balikatan and the regional militarization, what happened in Philippines. I am certain that there are many serious cases of land grabbing and militarization across the Philippines. I've once joined the Solidarity Mission in Mindoro and witnessed some of these realities firsthand. The situation in Negros, which has gained significant attention amid rising geopolitical tensions, has encouraged us to further understand that the Philippines occupies a strategic position in the Asia-Pacific geopolitical rivalry, particularly amid growing competition between the United States and China. In this context, the Balikatan joint military exercise have become a symbol of expanding defense cooperation and the increasing U.S. military presence in the Philippines. While officially presented as efforts to strengthen regional preparedness and stability, Balikatan is also part of a broader U.S. strategy to maintain its influence and military projection in the Indo-Pacific through alliances, military access, and joint exercises. The situation places Southeast Asia at risk of becoming an arena of great power competition as geopolitical tension rise. Civilian communities often bear the consequences, while strategic benefits are largely enjoyed by powerful states in the global north. Militarization also tends to define security from the perspective of the state rather than the people. As a result, like what Riza mentioned before, democratic space can shrink, security surveillance may expand, and the risk of violence against civilians can increase. The experience of Negros Occidental demonstrates that militarization is not only about troops or military drills. It also shapes how states respond to social issues. Demands for land rights, social justice, and basic rights can be framed as security threats rather than legitimate concerns requiring political solutions. For this reason, Balikatan is important to examine not only as a U.S.-Philippines issue, but also as a reflection of broader regional security trends. It raises the challenge of ensuring that growing militarization does not undermine people's rights, restrict democratic participation, or turn civilians into victims of wider geopolitical rivalries. Even if the direction of these developments may seem clear, collective efforts to resist and challenge them remain essential. I'd also like to address when land and security become the same issue. When security becomes the primary framework for managing social conflict, issues rooted in social injustice are transformed into matters of state security. This threatens not only land rights, but also democratic freedoms, including the rights to organize, speak out, and participate in political processes. The Negros experience is relevant across Southeast Asia because it highlights the links between agrarian conflicts, development, investment, and security. We experience this every day in Central Sulawesi as well, facing the expansion of palm oil plantation and nickel mining. Energy transition and downstreaming policies are increasingly threatening our living spaces rather than benefiting or recovering from the pre-existing impacts that we experience. Ultimately, it raises a fundamental question. When the interests of communities, investors, and state collide, who will be protected and who will be sacrificed? Indonesia is not outside the issue, of course. Indonesia and the Philippines face many of the same challenges. There is a long history of labeling, stigmatization, criminalization, and the use of security-based approach against communities defending land rights, environmental protection, and social justice. As a major global supplier of palm oil, nickel, coal, and other critical or strategic minerals, Indonesia has become deeply integrated into a resource extractive global economy. At the same time, industrial expansion, downstream processing projects, infrastructure development, and large-scale investment continue to grow across the country. In this context, investment stability is often prioritized, while agrarian conflicts and community resistance to development projects are treated as obstacles, similar to experience in other countries of the global south, including the Philippines. Economic interests frequently clash with communities seeking to protect their land, environmental, and livelihoods. In the global economy, countries of the global south, such as Indonesia, are often assigned three primary roles as sites of natural resource extraction, sources of cheap labor, and markets for finished goods produced by monopolistic capitalist economies. We are exploited for what we have, and at the same time turn into strategic consumers. This is a painful reality for us. Across Indonesia, including in the Central Sulawesi area, conflicts over natural resources are closely linked to large-scale plantation, critical mining industries, and also the National Strategic Project of the PSN and infrastructure developments. The consequences extend beyond the loss of land. They also mean the destruction of livelihoods and entire ways of life of our communities. In many cases, communities do not reject development itself. Rather, they demand the right to be heard, access to information, a healthy environment, and meaningful participation in shaping the future of their own region. However, when investment becomes the overriding priority of the government of the state, people's demands are often treated, like I said, as obstacles to be removed so that project can proceed. The result is deepening poverty, forcing us communities into greater dependence on the very actors that continue to contribute to our marginalization: the state, corporations, and development banks. As a consequence, social and agrarian conflicts are frequently reframed as security issues under the banner of food and energy security. Police and military forces are deployed to suppress resistance from the exploited communities. Like what is at stake is not only land, but also democratic space for people's right to determine the direction of development. The experience of Negros is relevant to Indonesia because it demonstrates that conflict between powerful economic interests and communities defending their land and livelihoods are often shaped by unequal power relations operating behind laws and public policies. I'd also like to highlight that the militarization is not limited to armed conflicts. It also appears through the growing involvement of military institutions in civilian, political, economic, and development affairs. In Indonesia, this trend can be seen in the expansion of military roles within civilian government positions, food security programs like Agrinas, development project, strategic area management, and even the Prabowo regime. Today's regime plans to establish hundreds of new battalions following the regulation to clear millions of hectares of tropical forests and indigenous forests for the expansion of large-scale plantation and food estate projects. In the name of renewable energy development and food self-sufficiency. The primary targets of this expansion are in Sulawesi, Papua, and Kalimantan. We know that Indonesia currently supplies more than 50% of the world palm oil and nickel output. However, this has come at a significant cost to rural and coastal communities, like our communities, as well as to workers who continue to be exploited in order to meet production demands and output targets. Again, the situation is made even worse when food, natural resources, and development are increasingly framed as security issues. In sectors such as plantation, forestry, mining, and national strategic projects, agrarian conflicts frequently intersect with investment interests. As a result, the line between national security and investment security becomes increasingly blurred. The experience of Negros serves as a warning that the expanding role of security institution in civilian affairs must be subject to democratic oversight to ensure that people's participation, rights, and sovereignty over their future are not undermined. Just a quick one that we should talk about militarization and imperialism. What is the connection? Militarization often goes hand in hand with economic interests and geopolitical strategies aimed at maintaining influence, securing investment, and controlling access to strategic territories and natural resources. In the Philippines, the growing presence of the U.S. military and the expansion of the Balikatan exercises are closely linked to the geopolitical rivalry between the United States and China in the Indo-Pacific region. Although Indonesia does not host foreign military bases like the Philippines or military exercises like in the Philippines, it has become increasingly integrated into the global economy through extractive industries, strategic minerals, and a large-scale investment project. In this context, security and stability are often viewed as essential conditions for sustaining investment and economic growth. As a result, social, agrarian, and environmental conflicts risk being treated primarily as security issues rather than matters of justice and rights. So I just want to point out what we can learn from Negros Occidental, since it's a our solidarity to people in Negros or the victims of the Toboso 19. What we can learn from Negros Occidental, the experience of Negros Occidental shows that violence is the violence in social conflicts is often the result of long-term process involving unequal power relations, development policies, and security-based approaches. Several key lessons can be drawn. First, land appropriation and land use changes carried out without community consent can trigger conflict. Second, development projects that exclude meaningful participation from affected communities deepen existing injustices. And investment interests are often prioritized over people's rights to land, healthy environment, sustainable livelihoods. Social and agrarian conflicts are frequently addressed through security measures rather than fair and democratic solutions. And last, communities defending their land and living spaces are often portrayed as threats to stability. The central lesson is that when people's rights are ignored and social issues are reframed as security concern, the risk of violence against civilians increase significantly. So that the experience in Toboso demonstrate that issue of land, natural resources, development, and security are relevant not only to the Philippines, but to all of Southeast Asia communities, including Indonesia. The fundamental question remains: who determines the direction of development, who controls natural resources, and who benefits from security policies? As long as people's rights and interests are not placed at the center of decision-making, agrarian conflicts, criminalization, civilian killings, and various forms of structural violence will continue to recur. Negros also reminds us that violence is not expressed only through physical force. It can also take the form of unjust policies, restriction on public participation, and the persistence of long-term inequalities. What Southeast Asia needs is not greater what Southeast Asia needs is not greater militarization, but stronger democracy, social justice, people sovereignty over land and livelihoods. Important also the solidarity that transcends national borders to ensure that development does not come at the expense of the most vulnerable. So let us continue to strengthen our struggle together, also solidarity among the peoples. Justice for the 2019, reject imperialism and militarization, fight for land justice and people sovereignty, and long live international solidarity. Thank you, everyone.
Ya, terima kasih Patricia. Saya juga kemudian ini ya, terima kasih bagaimana menunjukkan tidak apa yang kemudian terjadi di Negros itu sebenarnya juga merupakan cerminan apa yang terjadi di Indonesia. Karena kalau misal saya boleh menyampaikan contoh di Kalimantan Tengah, meninggalnya Gijik karena tertembak oleh Brimob itu juga salah satu bukti dari kekerasan gitu ya. Ketika kemudian masyarakat adat Dayak mencoba untuk memperjuangkan hak atas tanahnya dari tanah yang memang digarap melebihi dari izin selama belasan tahun dan kemudian berujung dengan kekerasan yang dilakukan oleh militerisme. Dan juga sekarang bagaimana militer kemudian berada di posisi-posisi publik, termasuk kemudian penertiban kawasan hutan oleh Satgas PKH dan kontrol yang dikontrol kemudian oleh Agrinas, itu juga menunjukkan bagaimana kemudian militerisme semakin eksis dan berkembang untuk kemudian juga menjadi juga mengontrol ya gitu, mengontrol dan mengamankan milik dari tuan-tuannya. Nah, saya mempersilahkan kawan-kawan yang lain karena pasti banyak juga kawan-kawan di sini yang juga punya pengalaman atau kemudian juga mau berpendapat, bertanya kepada narasumber kita. Saya boleh 3 orang yang untuk bertanya, silakan. Atau mungkin ada kawan-kawan yang juga selain bertanya, ada yang ingin sharing terkait bagaimana situasi di tempat asalnya begitu ya. Apa sih sebenarnya, apakah kemudian yang terjadi di Negros, penguasaan lahan secara besar-besaran, tidak hanya untuk selain untuk investasi, tapi juga untuk proyek-proyek yang mengatasnamakan pembangunan, infrastruktur, bahkan sekarang mengatasnamakan untuk penanganan krisis iklim, itu kemudian semakin meluas ya. Dan apa yang kemudian disampaikan Nona, pertanyaan penting yang mungkin juga bisa di-share oleh kawan-kawan yang ada di sini adalah siapa kemudian yang mendapat keuntungan terbesar dari pembangunan ini gitu, atau dari investasi ini. Terus kemudian bagaimana yang dirasakan oleh justru mayoritas rakyat atau kemudian masyarakat, baik itu masyarakat adat, masyarakat lokal, juga dari kawan-kawan buruh. Mungkin kawan-kawan bisa share atau kemudian juga berpendapat. Silakan.
Kartika
Halo, apakah terdengar ya suaraku? Karena kok
ada.
ini tetanggaku agak
Kalau
ada
belum ada yang
kondangan.
bertanya, saya ingin bertanya dong.
Boleh,
Mungkin ini
boleh,
juga
Tanah.
bisa jadi ini pertanyaan di benak kawan-kawan yang ada di sini. Hanya saja saya ingin coba mewakili jika itu juga memang dipikirkan oleh kawan-kawan. Bagaimana perkembangan situasi saat ini untuk penanganan kasus 19 kawan yang meninggal di tragedi Toboso? Mungkin G atau Enjo bisa menjawab ini. Terima kasih.
Baik, Ji atau Enjo, if you want to answer Patricia. Okay, Ji, you can go first.
Are you referring to the killings of the 19?
Yes.
Of course, the military and now even landlords in Negros and the governor is also a landlord, no, are saying that they, I don't know, they just say all those who were killed were combatants, and the governor and one big landlord, head of big sugar sugar federation, no? sugar planters federation, even caution, no, because some of those died, or a number of those died, I think 3 or 4 were students, no? Before. One is still a student, no? The one from UP. Two students, one from UP Diliman, the other from UP Manila, and 3 were former students, including our staff, no, Errol. So they are cautioning, because in the Philippines, the government also formed what we call the NTFL CAP, or the National Task Force to End Local Communist Insurgency, no? Something like that. It was formed during the time of Duterte, but Marcos Jr. Didn't abolish it. Actually, he increased the budget of that agency, which is the head is the president of the Philippines. So they are very firm in their propaganda that all those killed were combatants, and at the same time they are saying, especially in Negros, the governor and the head of the landlords there said that students should be cautioned, and they should be not only cautioned, no, they should be essentially they should be under surveillance, no, because they are saying students in the Philippines, young people in the Philippines are like stupid, don't know how to think for themselves, and they are like just being recruited by the rebels and the so-called rebel fronts, because they are easily to be manipulated, no, which is of course not true, no. I for one became an activist during martial law in the Philippines. My brother was an activist before me, before martial law, during the old Marcos. And actually, the first time I went to a rally, I was just high school. I was not yet an official, an official activist or organized. And my father was a retired military officer. No? And even in the Philippine, there are other activists who had brothers who were, or family members who were in the military, but they were also activists, no. So, and there were, even in the history of the Philippine struggle against Spanish colonialism, against the Americas, against the Japanese, against the corrupt puppet government of our country, many young people, no, became activists, and later many also chose the armed struggle, because they saw for their own eyes, no, what is happening in the country, and so they know the situation. Because if you are a student in the student movement in the Philippines, it is one of our orientation is you should go out of the classroom, because not all that you learn about our country, about our people, can be found in the classroom. No? Actually, there are teachers who are very conservative and teach you a different history, teach you a different situation. But it is up to you, no? As because students need to know the truth, to find out the truth by going out and being one with the masses. Thank you.
Okay, Enjo, if you want to answer.
Sorry, I actually missed the question. What was the question?
I'm just want to updating about the situation now in Negros, how the justice for the 19 civilians who being killed there. What are the progress now?
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. But yeah, just like what G has mentioned, the progress, if there's any progress at all coming from the government side in terms of, delivering justice to what has happened, is still very minimal, to say at its very best. But actually, I think it's more appropriate to say that the justice is very non-existent coming from government officials, because even I think just the other day, the if I remember it correctly, even the AFP chief were just released an opinion piece with a mainstream news outlet here in the Philippines, claiming that what red tagging is not, or as they say it, red tagging is just truth telling or something along those lines. So, the thing about what happened in Toboso in Negros is it actually reignited the long conversation happening here in the Philippines about about activism, about the people's struggle, and even about the armed struggle happening in the countryside. And this is something, after years and years, actually a decade of government oppression and repression, this is a topic that has become kind of a taboo, so to say, especially out in the public. But with the happening in Toboso, on top of the other instances that something similar has been, where civilians were mislabeled as armed group combatants, or civilians were also included in the murders, because similar cases also happened even earlier this year. The Toboso incidents, the Toboso 19 massacre, reinvigorated the people's attention to actually talk about these things. This is not something that the government can just pull out of thin air, out of convenience, and have it be used to monger fear among Filipinos. This is a result of the material conditions, especially in the provinces, that are still not answered, that are still not provided solutions to by the government. And the Filipinos are actually much more sensitive now. They are much more willing to, delve into these sensitive and critical questions of being a Filipino. And truth is always going to come out, especially from the people themselves who actually experience these material conditions. So for example, in Negros, right after the Toboso 19 massacre, the people, the locals were easy to, they were actually very quick to claim that not all who died were combatants as claimed by the AFP soldiers. A lot of them presented themselves as, having been able to work with, let's say, with RJ Ledesma, the journalist and organizer among the victims, civilian victims, and even with the 10 armed combatants of the New People's Army, because just like what we've mentioned, among the 19 killed, 10 were actually claimed by the New People's Army as their combatants. But even those 10 individuals were paraded as heroes of the local of their localities. So this is a truth that is not going to be denied from the people. They will always find ways on how to present the truth as itself. They will always find a way on how to counter these funded propaganda machineries and tactics by the state and its affiliated organizations and institutions. And especially because they see that, the what happened to Toboso is something very much connected. It's directly tied to their livelihoods, to the answer to the long since happening hunger and famine in Negros. It's directly tied to it. So having concrete answers and justice to what has happened, they soon discover that it is very much related to what they are after. And if it's anything, it's actually mobilized more Filipinos, especially even the youth here in urban centers, thousands of miles away from where it happened, from Toboso. And yet you see these Filipino students, these new activists, taking up action to call for justice, to call for a social change, and to finally dismantle this systemic oppression that is being used by the state. So just to sum it up, I guess, in terms of like progress coming from the state's side, I don't think there's been any, because they're to say that they are very much in denial of what has happened is an understatement. But if it's anything, it's the progress coming from the people's initiatives, from the grassroots initiatives, and even with this the international solidarity action. We're already about 2 months since what has happened, and yet we still see a huge surge of support and calls for demand for justice to what has happened. It's still pouring in, and the hypocrisy of the Marcos administration and its instruments, and in general of the U.S. imperialism, being the head puppeteer of it all. It's just all being spilled out onto the streets, and the people are spilling out in the streets to call for changes for it.
Can I add a short one? Because we are still very angry, no? Because up to now, no? 3 remains of those killed, no? Were not the ones given to them by the funeral parlor were not their family members, including our staff. No? That's why we will have a press conference this June 9 because of that. No? We are very angry. The family is very angry because when they came to the funeral parlor, the owners, actually the one who owned is the family of a police officer, and there were many police and military there, and they just showed a picture, no, before the embalmment of the cadavers. Even the embalmment is not so good, no. So so they never allowed to see the remains themselves, no? So in our culture, I think any culture, no, that's disgusting. No? So and now there's a new like rule that you cannot supposedly because Errol's remains has already been what's this nakalibing na nakalibing na
Laid to rest.
laid to rest in
Yeah.
Negros by another family, family of a combatant. No? But the government, they have a new rule that you cannot exhume the body 3 years after it has been already laid down. No? So anyway, we are still doing what we can, and we will also inform you about these developments.
Thank you,
And
Enjo and G.
sorry,
Mhm.
I just also have to say there is also an ongoing campaign to call for the release of 5 civilians that were also arrested around the time when the Toboso 19 massacre happened. So 5 peasant leaders and farmers, if I remember it correctly, were also apprehended illegally. So it's an adjacent campaign amid the calls for justice for Toboso 19.
Oke. Di kolom chat itu juga ada satu pertanyaan. Mungkin untuk kawan-kawan baik Enjo maupun Ci ya. Apakah kemudian militer di Filipina itu memang diberi ruang untuk berbisnis karena mirip dengan atau barangkali mirip seperti di Indonesia, di mana militer kemudian menjadi direksi perusahaan perkebunan sawit. Bolehkah di-share Ji dan Enjo, apakah juga ada hal yang mirip?
Okay, I responded. I said, I answered, many military police officers are corrupt themselves, no? Because there are many programs of the government which is part of their anti-insurgency campaign. One of which is if you surrender, if you are really a rebel, because even our members, no, more than 2,000 members of the National Federation of Sugar Workers were forced to surrender during COVID, no, in Escalante. Escalante is beside Toboso, no. They will give you money depending on what kind of firearm you have. Of course, there's no firearm. No? So they will invent that a firearm was given to you. Maybe the maximum is 10,000 per person. But since these are all fabricated, so they will just get the money for themselves. No? And there are many. Even the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict. They have an 8 billion pesos budget. So right after the Toboso massacre, they had their own peace rally in Toboso, no? A few days after, so-called peace rally. So who provided the funds? So how much is the fund? There's no auditing for that, no? And many other projects. But usually, are they like in Indonesia? Are they appointed to be executives in palm oil plantations? It's not allowed. No, if you are a active military officer, you cannot become an executive of a private company. But usually, especially generals, no, were favorites of the president. After their they are appointed in cabinet or other positions in government, and some may become executives in palm oil companies. My father, no, after retiring from the military, he was like a security officer in a logging company in northern Philippines and in one plantation in Mindanao. I think.
Yeah, so I think G has actually explained it well. it's not allowed in the laws, but you actually don't need to get into the businesses of these private projects, because the institution itself is a very big scam. It's a very big, cash cow among themselves. So even with, let's say, with the barangay development program under the NTFL CAC's lead, it's been receiving billions worth of funding from the government, and yet when they did auditing, supposedly they give 2 million pesos to each barangay, which is the very basic unit of government here in the Philippines. They give 2 million pesos worth of funding for local projects to every barangay that would be able to claim that they are free of insurgency, and yet there isn't actually any like clear auditing procedure or practice to check out if these are actually being followed thoroughly. And yeah, a lot of the soldiers are also, once they retire or once they've been decommissioned, they present themselves as either security officers or trainers for these private security providers to the very companies that are actually situated in provinces like in Negros Island. So the system itself is a big business. So even though they are actually prohibited from being stakeholders in private businesses, they do not. I think they no longer need they no longer see the need to be in a private business when the system itself or the institutions themselves are big scams and cash cows.
Oke, thank you, Ci, Enjo. Apakah ada pertanyaan lagi? Karena kalau mungkin tidak ada pertanyaan, artinya ini apa yang kemudian terjadi di Negros ya. Ini tidak hanya terkait soal Filipina, tapi juga karena ini juga ada campur tangan, kemudian juga intervensi dari US, begitu ya, US Army. Artinya memang imperialisme kalau yang disampaikan oleh Patricia tadi itu juga bagaimana mereka juga berupaya untuk mengamankan gitu ya, mengamankan wilayahnya. Kemudian bagaimana mereka menggali lebih sumber daya alam untuk memenuhi kebutuhan mereka. Dan ini pasti akan disambut dengan perlawanan-perlawanan karena mau tidak mau kemudian kehidupan rakyat yang ada di negara-negara yang kemudian dieksploitasi itu akan mengalami penderitaan yang cukup tajam. Sebelum menutup, mungkin saya ingin ada closing statement.
Sorry, ada
Iya?
pertanyaan di kolom
Oh,
komen.
sorry. Iya, karena barusan saya cek. Oke, ini ada pertanyaan dari Dani. How does the influence of the government to the legal process and what are the biggest challenge? Mana tadi pertanyaan? What is the biggest challenge in holding
maybe I
armed
can answer.
force accountable in Philippines?
There
Yeah.
are sometimes the military, even the police, intimidates judges, and sometimes even lawyers. They not only they have killed many lawyers already in the Philippines, including in Negros. And there was a time, there were, I think, few, but one in Mindanao, the other one in Manila. Judges, rightist judges, who issued tens of warrants of arrest. The one in Mindanao was even more. He issued 500 warrants of arrest. Half of which have no names. John Does or Jane Does, including our one of our elder staff who is in hiding right now. So, but what is good also, there are more judges who are sincere, no? And there have been many cases that we have won in court, no? Including cases for allegedly for terrorism, because we have an anti-terrorism law, or financing terrorism.
And the thing is, the state itself, or like how our laws are designed and enacted here in the Philippines, calling for accountability and justice, if the state officials or state instruments are the ones behind as the perpetrators, it's actually not that strong. Like we don't have that many laws to be used if the perpetrators are behind. Or I mean, if the perpetrators behind are actually state officials and personnel, like let's say military generals, because it's one thing for you, let's say, to have done murder towards a fellow citizen, but it's another level, right? To be a military official and be behind the murder of a Filipino civilian. So um the the laws that we could be using to hold them accountable, let's say the local adaptation of the international humanitarian laws, the Karil, they are actually not being followed by the state itself. The state itself is even in denial that they actually entered into these agreements, that they and that there are laws that are being enacted to supposedly to follow these agreements. They only get to I only ever got to see news of the state using international humanitarian laws when they are suspecting someone of uh of being a New People's Army rebel and linking them to supposed encounters. Most of the times are even made up, these encounters. So, there's very minimal law to actually be used by citizens, by locals, to call for accountability. And even if you actually get to file for one, it's gonna be a very long and tedious process. It's very exhaustive. It's very, that's why a lot of the locals, especially those coming from the provinces, I think it actually helped on the part of the military normalizing this kind of lawlessness, because even calling for justice while following the bounds and the terms that the state has determined for legal actions, it's very it's very out of reach, especially for marginalized sectors. So I guess it kind of puts into perspective why it's actually much easier for us to understand why, especially in the countryside, marginalized farmers, oppressed indigenous peoples would rather take up arms themselves and demand justice on means that they know of. Because just like what Patricia has mentioned, these inequalities and injustices have long, stripped us of democratic spaces, and calling or holding them accountable to the laws that they themselves set is and to this day is just kind of a very far reach for us to be able to win in. So for example, for grassroots advocacies and rights groups, we'd rather have our focuses on the ground level and be able to organize these people to put pressure on the state itself to listen to what they demand. So yeah.
Oke, Terima kasih. Di kolom pertanyaan ada 2 pertanyaan lagi. Yang pertama tentang tata kelola perusahaan sawit, dan yang kedua adalah kalau tidak salah pernah terjadi kekerasan militer pada tahun 1972 yang diberlakukan oleh Ferdinand Marcos, sehingga atas tersebut sempat terjadi krisis pada tahun 1980-an. Apakah hanya soal perkebunan tebu saja atau adakah yang lain? Mungkin untuk bisa dijawab secara singkat ya, Ji dan Enjo. Terima kasih.
Okay. During the old Marcos time, the sugar industry was like they monopolized. No? They set up one of his cronies, Benedicto, set up like a quasi-government corporation that it's the only that all sugar produced in the Philippines should be pass through that company. No? Because during that time there was sugar in the Philippines was primarily for export, and there were more sugar cane fields. No, unlike now, it's less than 400, more or less 400,000 hectares. Before around 600,000 plus. No, so it depended on the world market. So what he did in I think in 1985, no, that's where Enjo showed the effect after the malnourished child like in Africa. So what he did was he chose to like gamble. No, he didn't sell sugar for export because he wanted to bid that that most probably the price of sugar would go up. But it did not go up, it went down. So even the landlords were angry with him because they lost money, and the effect on the small sugar planters and workers was worse. No, it's like for the first time in I think that was in 1985. No, that malnourished children, no, are present in the Philippines, like in Africa, which never happened before in our history. Other than that, before Marcos was ousted, there was I think it was September 20, no? 1985 also. There was what we call Welcome Bayan or People Strike. No? It's not only in Negros but in the whole Philippines. But what happened in Negros, that was in Escalante. Escalante is the next town to Tuboso in northern end. There was because of that people strike where many sugar workers also went, but also other sectors, there was also a massacre. No? Initiated by the police, paramilitary. So they said 20, at least 20 people were killed, most of whom were sugar workers. No? But many more also were wounded. No? So Negros actually has the most number of, as our said, the most number of massacres, especially now at our present history.
Oke, terima kasih karena pertanyaan juga sudah terjawab semua dan waktu sudah menunjukkan jam 7.46. Mungkin bisa ada closing statement dari Ji, Enjo, dan Patricia juga oleh Bang Rizal ya. Saya persilakan Ji dulu.
Actually, I'm very happy we have this activity, and actually Tipos is consistent, not only in advocating for the rights of workers in palm oil plantations in many countries, especially Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, but also in taking up political positions and support to our struggle, because it's not only this is the first time that we have an online discussion on the one of the present political situation in the Philippines. But before, people also made statements in support, no, including writing to the ILO, no, to the International Labor Organization, because during Duterte's time, he never allowed, no, the International Labor Organization to conduct high-level mission here. No? It was only during Marcos, but because of pressure also from peoples, from our own networks, and from other groups. So we are very thankful, and hopefully we can continue these activities. And on our part, we will also provide solidarity to your struggles in Indonesia and other countries whose members are in peoples.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Like what I've mentioned, platforms like this is very important for us to be able to tell the stories, tell the truth, especially of what is actually being experienced on the ground and by locals and by rights advocates themselves. We are living now in a society, in a setting where black propaganda and misinformation and disinformation are literally being funded by taxpayers' money. So any chance that we can get to be in a safe platform altogether and exchange stories and exchange experiences, learn from each other, and most of all, stand in solidarity across our causes, across our sectors. These are all important, and these are all very very much highlighted as our contributions to changing the setting, changing the system that has long been ongoing. So yes, thank you very much. I'm pretty sure fellow environmentalists, even in Indonesia, have now realized that being an environmental advocate does not just keep us within the bounds of talking about environment. It has become a very intersectional practice or field that when you are a genuine environmental advocate, you also get to talk now about peasant rights, indigenous rights, human rights. So we are very much looking forward to our continued solidarity and collaborative campaigns. CEC is a member of the Asia Pacific Network for Environmental Defenders. We are also in close monitoring with similar environmental campaigns happening in Indonesia. And I'm pretty sure we are all looking forward to more solidarity actions because, our struggle is also your struggle and vice versa. And that only means our victories in these struggles also mean the victories in your struggles. And, we all get to do our share in ushering in a new system that finally listens to the people. So yeah, long live international solidarity.
Iya, saya sedikit saja. Sekali lagi, saya sangat berharap sebenarnya pesan solidaritas atau diskusi solidaritas seperti ini terus dilakukan bareng-bareng Tipols, bahwa inisiatif ini adalah inisiatif yang sangat baik karena perjuangan rakyat tidak peduli lintas negara, lintas batas rezim dan sebagainya, tapi memang kita saling terhubung karena khususnya kita yang di negara-negara selatan ini memang ada untuk melayani kepentingan negara-negara kapitalis besar, dan maka perjuangan rakyat yang itu pasti terdampak dari ekspansi perkebunan, ekspansi pertambangan yang itu untuk memenuhi kepentingan mereka yang ada di barat sana, harus bersatu, saling bersolidaritas, saling mendukung perjuangan antar rakyat. Terima kasih sekali Tipol sudah mengambil peran untuk ini. Terima kasih juga Ji dan Enjo sudah berbagi situasi di Negros dan di Filipina. Penting buat kami di Indonesia, kita sebagai negara tetangga, justru yang lebih dekat, kita harus lebih saling mempertajam solidaritas antar perjuangan rakyat. Entah itu adalah pejuang lingkungan, pejuang HAM, tapi intinya kita disatukan pada bahwa rakyat harus memiliki kedaulatan untuk pembangunannya sendiri. Tidak ditentukan oleh siapa-siapa, tapi ditentukan oleh rakyat itu sendiri. Terima kasih untuk kawan-kawan semua yang sudah ada di sini. Kita berharap mungkin next time kita bisa bersolidaritas untuk kawan-kawan di Papua yang saat ini juga sedang mengalami militerisasi yang sangat parah. Saya barusan bertemu dengan kawan-kawan dari Papua saat ini di Bali di konferensi ini, dan mereka mengabarkan bahwa rezim Prabowo sedang akan mengirimkan puluhan lagi batalion untuk memastikan program food estate uh, dan program-program lain yang sedang PSN yang sedang digalakan oleh rezim Prabowo ini berlangsung dengan aman di Papua. Um, itu mungkin dari saya. Terima kasih semuanya, Kakak Tika, CEC, and Uma, and also Kalikasan, especially for Tipos. Thank you so much.
I think what interests me the most is hearing from Comrade Enjo that how do we can pursue justice when the perpetrator itself is the state itself. It's similar things, almost identical in Indonesia, from the reality that our current president has been associated with serious human rights violations, to the increasing influence of the military personnel in public institutions, including state-owned enterprise, and the extent to which the parliament is dominated by the business interests. These realities pose significant challenges for those seeking justice and social change. These conditions also requires us to carefully consider our political stance and advocacy strategies when the legal institutions and formal mechanisms are controlled by the powerful interest. The struggle for justice cannot rely solely on litigations or legal complaint. Instead, it must be rooted in the collective power of ordinary people. For workers, for example, our greatest strength lies in our ability to organize and carry out strikes in stopping the productions. For the peasants, our greatest strength lies in our collective actions, including land occupations and the defense of our territories. Throughout our history, every meaningful change has rarely been granted from above, including from the state. It has been won through our organized mass movement from below. From these discussions, I feel like this becomes a reminder for us that the genuine transformations of these oppressive conditions can only be achieved when workers, the peasants, and other oppressed people can unite and build strong alliances. And as always, long live international solidarity.
Long live international solidarity.
Ya,
Thank you everyone.
terima kasih untuk Peoples yang sudah mengadakan forum ini. Terima kasih juga untuk Ci dari Uma, Enjo dari CIC, juga Patricia dari Jagadeka, dan untuk semua kawan-kawan yang ya, untuk kawan-kawan yang ada di sini. Tadi yang disampaikan Ci dan Enjo bahwa mereka masih terus melakukan perjuangan dan mencoba untuk tetap berupaya melakukan kampanye terkait soal kawan-kawan 19 orang dari Negros. Kawan-kawan di sini mungkin juga bisa mengirimkan pesan solidaritas kepada umat dan CEC terhadap perjuangan mereka dan untuk pengungkapan di 19 keadilan untuk 19 orang dari Negros. Nah, karena ini juga apa yang terjadi di sana juga dapat terjadi di kita juga begitu. Dan saya juga memiliki harapan yang sama untuk tim POLS supaya bisa mengakomodir ruang-ruang untuk kita melakukan solidaritas dan perjuangan secara kolektif ya, gitu. Mungkin itu. Long live International Solidarity and terima kasih untuk semuanya. Sebelum kita selesai, bolehkah semuanya membuka untuk kita